Let me ask you something. Why do we get so bothered? Not just irritated for a second, but genuinely shaken, disturbed, knocked off balance. Someone cuts us off in traffic and we carry it for half an hour. A coworker sends a cold email and suddenly it lives in our mind all day. A friend takes too long to reply and somehow it starts feeling personal. Why does something so small have the power to affect us so deeply? Because most of the time it's not really about the moment. It's about what the moment touches inside us. What bothers us most is rarely just the event itself. It's what the event activates: old insecurity, unmet expectations, fear of rejection, fear of being overlooked, fear of losing control. That's what's really happening. We tell ourselves we're reacting to the traffic, the email, the silence, the tone. But underneath that, we're reacting to what we think it means. Maybe it feels like disrespect. Maybe it feels like dismissal. Maybe it confirms a fear we were already carrying. And once the mind interprets something as a threat, even a small one, everything changes. We tense up, we get defensive, we personalize it, we react. Not because the threat is always real, but because the mind is fast. And when ego, identity, and emotion get involved, the mind becomes a storyteller. Someone criticizes your idea, and suddenly it feels like they're questioning your value. Someone forgets to include you, and it feels like you're invisible. Someone gives you attitude, and it feels like rejection. The event is small. The meaning we attach to it is massive. And that's why two people can experience the same exact situation, and one walks away untouched, while the other carries it for days. Because it's never just about what happened. It's about what we brought into the moment. If you're already carrying self-doubt, it doesn't take much to trigger you. If you're exhausted, emotionally stretched, craving validation, or secretly afraid you're not enough, even a minor moment can feel heavy. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means there's something deeper asking for your attention. And this is where growth begins. Because becoming unbothered is not about becoming cold. It's not about pretending you don't feel. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about understanding emotion. It's about being able to pause and ask a better question. Not how could they do this to me, but why did this hit me so hard? That question changes everything. Because the moment you ask why, you create space. Space between what happened and what you felt. Space between the trigger and the reaction. Space between emotion and identity. And in that space, there is power. That is where self-awareness lives. That is where emotional discipline begins. That is where you stop being controlled by the moment and start choosing who you want to be inside of it. The truth is, all of us have reacted in ways we regret. We've all replayed conversations in our heads. We've all wished we said less or more or nothing at all. We've all had moments where emotion took the wheel. But the goal isn't perfection. The goal is mastery. To feel without collapsing. To be aware without becoming consumed. To experience emotion without letting emotion define your behavior. That kind of strength is quiet. And it doesn't come from looking outward. It comes from doing the internal work most people avoid. Because sometimes the reason we're bothered is uncomfortable. Sometimes our pride got bruised. Sometimes we wanted approval and didn't get it. Sometimes we haven't fully accepted ourselves. So the smallest sign of rejection feels like proof of our worst fear. But once you can see that clearly, you stop being ruled by it. You stop spiraling. You stop making every moment mean something about your worth. You stop handing your peace over to people who were never meant to control it. And that's the first shift. The shift from reaction to reflection. The shift from why is this happening to me to what is this revealing in me. That is where real emotional freedom begins. Because the strongest people are not the ones who never feel. They're the ones who understand what they feel and choose not to be ruled by it. That is what it means to train yourself to become unbothered. Not numb, not indifferent, anchored. There is always a moment before a reaction. A small one. Sometimes so small you barely notice it. Someone says something that rubs you the wrong way. A message gets ignored. A tone feels disrespectful. A comment online hits a nerve. And in that brief moment, you have a choice. Most people don't realize that. They think they just reacted. But every reaction has a cost. Every time you answer frustration with frustration, anger with anger, ego with ego, you pay for it. You pay with peace. You pay with clarity. You pay with energy. And often, you pay with trust. Because reactivity doesn't just disturb your inner world. It affects your relationships. It changes how people experience you. When you're always easily triggered, people become careful around you. They start filtering themselves. They avoid honesty. They withdraw feedback. They stop feeling safe. And without realizing it, you build a reputation you never intended to build. Not as someone powerful, but as someone unstable, someone fragile, someone ruled by their emotional weather. That's the hidden cost of reactivity. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes you easier to control. Because if someone else can pull emotion out of you whenever they want, then they have access to your state of mind. And that is expensive. We live in a world that constantly tries to provoke us. Notifications, opinions, comparisons, criticism, pressure, noise, everything is asking for a reaction. But just because the world is loud doesn't mean you have to be. Just because someone provokes you doesn't mean you have to surrender your peace to them. Real strength is not found in the outburst. It's found in the pause, in the breath before the reply, in the decision not to match chaos with chaos, in the discipline to say, I feel this, but I'm not going to let it control me. That is not weakness. That is leadership. And leadership starts with self-leadership. Because if you cannot lead yourself through tension, disappointment, frustration, or offense, then eventually those moments will lead you. The truth is, reacting is easy. Anyone can react. Anyone can lash out. Anyone can defend themselves impulsively. Anyone can raise their voice, fire back, shut down, or storm off. But responding? Responding takes awareness. Responding means you are present enough to notice what you feel without becoming it. It means you can say, I feel angry right now, without letting that anger become the author of your next decision. That is emotional regulation, not suppression. Regulation. Suppression buries emotion. Regulation understands it. Suppression says, I shouldn't feel this. Regulation says, I do feel this, but I still get to choose. That choice is everything. Because every time you respond instead of react, you strengthen something inside yourself. You reinforce patience. You reinforce stability. You reinforce integrity. And eventually, people feel that. They trust you more. They respect you more. They feel safer around you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent. And consistency builds credibility. So the next time you feel that internal surge, that heat, that urge to defend, prove, or retaliate, pause and ask yourself, is this reaction worth the cost? Because when you understand the value of your peace, you stop giving it away so cheaply. Now here's a deeper truth. A lot of our suffering comes from trying to control things that were never ours to control. We try to control how people see us, how quickly things happen, how others respond, how conversations unfold, how outcomes turn out. And when reality refuses to obey our expectations, we become frustrated, anxious, and bothered. But control is often an illusion. You do not control how people interpret you. You do not control their maturity. You do not control their tone, their timing, their projections, or their opinions. You do not control the market, the traffic, the delay, the rejection, or the pace of life. And yet many people spend their entire lives exhausting themselves trying. That is why peace feels so far away. Because peace and control are not the same thing. Control is rigid. Peace is grounded. Control demands certainty. Peace builds trust. Control grips. Peace releases. And one of the most powerful things you can ever learn is this. You do not need control over everything to remain steady within yourself. That is what detachment really is. Not apathy, not coldness, not withdrawal. Detachment is caring without clinging. It is showing up fully without becoming attached to the outcome. It is doing your best without making your worth dependent on how it is received. It is being committed without becoming consumed. That is freedom. Because when you stop trying to control everything outside of you, you finally have the energy to focus on what is inside your control. Your attitude, your effort, your boundaries, your integrity, your response, your resilience. That is your real work. And once you take full ownership of those things, the rest begins to lose its power over you. You stop begging for validation. You stop chasing understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to force outcomes. Instead, you become steady. Not because life got easier, but because your center got stronger. Ask yourself this in moments of stress. What part of this is actually mine to carry? If it's yours, handle it with clarity. If it isn't, release it with grace. That one practice can save you years of unnecessary exhaustion. Because not every problem is your responsibility. Not every opinion needs your response. Not every conflict deserves your energy. Some things are meant to be observed, not absorbed. And that ability to witness chaos without becoming chaotic is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity. Now let's talk about peace. Real peace. Not the kind that depends on life going your way. The kind you build within yourself. Peace is not the absence of pressure. It is the presence of inner stability. It is knowing what gets access to your mind and what does not. It is choosing what deserves your attention. It is refusing to let every demand, every mood, every opinion, every interruption move into your internal world and make itself at home. Most people protect their homes better than they protect their minds. If someone walked into your house every day, drained your energy, disrespect your space, and left a mess behind, you would set boundaries immediately. But mentally, emotionally, we let too much in. We entertain every thought. We answer every demand. We absorb every mood. We carry things that do not belong to us. And then we wonder why we feel overwhelmed. Peace does not happen by accident. It has to be protected, which means you have to start noticing what disrupts it. What conversations leave you drained? What habits increase your anxiety? What environments make you smaller? What relationships pull you away from yourself? This isn't about blaming others. It's about learning yourself. Because peace is lost slowly. Not always in dramatic breakdowns, but in small daily compromises. Saying yes when you mean no. Ignoring your limits. Overcommitting. Seeking approval. Silencing yourself. Entertaining things that chip away at your spirit. That is how peace leaks. And protecting it requires courage. Because once you start choosing peace, not everyone will understand. Some people will call it distance. Some will call it selfishness. Some will call it change. And maybe it is change. Good change. Necessary change. Because choosing peace means you stop living on everyone else's terms. You stop measuring your value by how useful, available, or agreeable you are. You stop performing. You stop proving. You stop abandoning yourself just to be accepted. And in that shift, something beautiful happens. You become more grounded, more present, more patient, more creative, more whole. Because protecting your peace does not make you less generous. It makes your generosity healthier. You stop pouring from an empty cup. You stop serving people from depletion. You start showing up from fullness instead of fatigue. That is wisdom. Peace is not passive. Peace is disciplined. It is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. When to engage and when to walk away. When to correct and when to release. When to hold the boundary and when to let the moment pass. That is what it means to become unbothered. Not that nothing affects you, but that fewer things control you. Not that you never feel pain, but that you no longer collapse every time life tests you. Not that the world becomes calm, but that you do. And that kind of calm is powerful. Because the most powerful person in the room is rarely the loudest. It is usually the most grounded, the one who listens deeply, the one who doesn't rush to defend, the one who doesn't need to win every argument, the one who understands their own emotions well enough not to be ruled by them. That is the energy people trust. That is the presence people follow. That is the strength the world respects. So the next time life tests you, and it will, don't just ask what happened. Ask why it hit you. Ask what it revealed. Ask whether your reaction is worth the price. Ask what part of the moment is actually yours to control. And then choose. Choose the pause. Choose the breath. Choose the response. Choose the boundary. Choose the peace. Because peace is not found in perfect conditions. It is built one decision at a time, one pause at a time, one boundary at a time, one released burden at a time. This is the work. The quiet work, the inner work, the work that changes everything. And when you commit to it, you become different, more steady, more clear, more difficult to disturb, more aligned with who you actually want to be. That is the mind shift. That is the movement.